Hi, in this video we're going to look at some of what was involved in dealing with an issue that we had, in that we have our automation platform has a very powerful touchscreen UI system, both for editing and deploying them. And we needed, these things came about long before phones became really a big thing, and particularly phones that were powerful enough to be of use for this sort of thing. So we didn't really have to worry about that at the time. You know, our product is Windows-based and our viewer is Windows-based as well. But over time, of course, it became more and more important that we be able to support non-Windows clients. And we had a couple of options. Of course, we could have just done something completely different. And we could have done something very simple that used just local platform-specific standard controls and that kind of thing. But we decided not to do that and to do something considerably more complex, but better. And we're going to discuss kind of what that is here. So first, just a quick peek just to give you some perspective here. This is our interface viewer. This is the Windows one. And it's just displaying some user interfaces that were auto-generated. There's nothing special about these. You could have built this yourself by hand. It's just that we can spit these out based on some user configuration. And of course, as you can see, they can be pretty fancy, but the thing about them is that they're purely graphical. There's only one window involved here, so even if there's other pop-ups and things, these are all our own windowing system implementation that's purely graphical. So there's only really one window, and that was kind of our out, that we could use this to basically cast our content to remote clients, because there's really only graphical output happening here. Right, so we're going to kind of look at how that happened here. One thing that kind of course, saves us is that we have all of our own code. So all of the graphical output was done via our graphics device output class, which would be down in here. So this is the graphics device type stuff with fonts and images and pins and all that kind of thing. And the basic device interface is here, and this is where you have all the stuff for drawing bitmaps and drawing text and all of that. So what we did was we virtualized this so that we could create a different implementation of it, where all of these commands could effectively be queued up and spit out to something else, right? So what we did was, in the UI system here, the touchscreen system, we split it out so that we have a separate window-based engine that creates one scheme that will draw to a window. And then this is the actual program that you just saw, and all it does is really, it's a simple wrapper around this window-based one. But now we can also create another engine which can be embedded within a server, and then that server can then connect to a client and basically can just push these graphical commands to the client, right? So if we go down here to our web server, which is how we do it, because in this case it's browser-based, which we'll see soon here. If we expand out this client library here, there is a web Riva, and a Riva stands for our remote interface viewer architecture, which is the protocol that is used to do this. And this basically is an engine that provides the guts for what I was just talking about, of creating virtual instances of our user interface engine in a server and spitting out the graphical commands. And it also accepts touchscreen commands. And then this guy here, in order to make this fairly sane, what I did was to define the protocol in an XML file. And this compiler guy here reads this XML file, and it spits out code for, on the one hand, the C++ side that we need to deal with, and on the other hand, this TypeScript stuff that the browser side engine uses. So that ensures that everything is kept in sync, and we can have quite a complex, set of commands and things with minimal work, because a lot of it is just automatically generated. So let's take a look at the actual engine here. And this proto guy here is what got spit out, or some of what got spit out. So if we open that up, we can see that it spits out a lot of constants for us that are used in the protocol, and there are various enumerations. And our side, on the C++ side, it also creates this tools thing, which is very helpful, because it basically just lets us have commands that we can call and pass it the information that comes from the virtualized graphics device. And you can notice that these are very similar. In fact, they match up exactly with those graphics device commands that we saw earlier. and they take the same parameters, and it will format them correctly and just give us back a pointer to a buffer, and then we can just pass that off and say, please send this. So it drastically simplifies things. So it has all the commands that we need. So that was a huge help to do it that way. And now if we look at, we have here like a gesture engine. So we have a standard gesture engine, which takes user input from a touchscreen and generates output that a application can respond to. So we also kind of virtualize that. Well, actually it already was virtualized, but we created a specific derivative of that that just accepts commands from the client and basically just spits them out into the interface engine as though they came from a local touchscreen. So that's all virtualizing the other direction. And really that's all that's going on almost, is the graphics commands going one way and the touchscreen input commands coming back the other direction. Okay, so that's basically the sort of the server side of it. And ultimately there turned out not to be a lot to do, because of course the vast majority of the code is actually in the user interface engine. Ultimately all we're really having to do here is redirect graphics commands. Effectively, one of these guys gets created by the web server for each incoming session, and it represents that session with that particular client, and it creates an instance of the gesture engine and an instance of the Magic Graphics device and wires them into the touchscreen engine. So there's really not a whole lot to it. And so then what we needed to do was to create a client in the browser that would accept these commands, and that was done using TypeScript. And I'm no fan of the browser as a development system, but you have to do what you have to do. And that's down here. And that one, this is one thing where we don't use our own scheme because it's all web stuff. So we use just Microsoft's VS Code IDE, and it's built from the command line using a couple of files. So it's very simple. But if we look inside here, we can see that this is the TypeScript stuff that the automatic generator spits out, and it's basically all the same stuff, but just in a form that's useful for JavaScript. It doesn't spit out the helper stuff because for various reasons that's not very practical in JavaScript to do those same sorts of things, but at least it saves us all of this work here of keeping all this stuff in sync, which would get to be a real pain if it needed to be done that way by hand. And the actual application basically just there's a lot of text up here which describes the many states that this program has, and how we have to work through those states to get to where we're going, and how we process all of the commands and everything. So it's pretty messy because of the purely asynchronous nature of JavaScript, which is no fun to program in for something this complex, but it works. So all of that stuff is handled in here, and we can kind of demonstrate this now. So we have this here. And so I have created, this is our administrative interface for our product here. And I've created a WebRiva user, and I've pointed it at that particular user interface there. And so I can just go log in to the browser using that, and it will connect and display that particular user interface. And you can see that it looks exactly the same. It acts the same. Some of these things I have to do with the touchscreen instead of the mouse, so you can't really see me. The only thing that we lose is that we don't get smooth scrolling. So for something like this, you get kind of you get the flick and page type of scheme instead of the smooth scrolling as we would on the Windows side. So if we did that over here, then we could do it like this and get the smooth scrolling stuff, which kind of gets jerky under the video recorder guy here. So yeah, that is one thing that we lose. And we also lose, we currently, at least, we can't do web cameras in this scheme. One complication, of course, with all this is that because our stuff is purely graphical, in order to do a web camera, we can't really embed it in the same window. It has to be another window. So it will always be on top of any other of these, we call these widgets, no matter what its Z order, no matter where it is in the list of displayed widgets, it's always going to be on top because it's a separate window. So there are some concerns there. But overall, the benefits that we get from having a purely graphical system of being able to do lots of transparency, this particular one doesn't really show that off all that well, but you can do very fancy effects and stuff because of the fact that we aren't dependent upon separate windows for each of these things. And there's some other stuff down here. Right? So you can scroll up and down and you can add your own tiles here and all that kind of stuff. And all of this, like I said, this is nothing special about this stuff. It's just stuff that we generated for you. It could all be created. So we could go down here and take a look at that stuff just really quickly. So go interfaces, and this is the stuff that we spit out from that auto generation system. So we look at those tiles there. So all that stuff is just in here. You can edit all of that. You can control attributes and all that kind of stuff. So it's the kind of the stuff that you would expect for a nice UI editing system, and it's quite fancy. There's no code involved in any of this. This is all just point and click. It's all quite nice. Anyway, that's sort of the story there, and the moral of the story. Ultimately, because of the fact that we had control over our code, we were able to, kind of create a solution that works very well for us, and which saves our customers from having to just turn around and create a completely new set of user interfaces. They can take what they've got and just view them from a browser. And as you can see, the performance is good. So that's it. And, hopefully some of this would be useful for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and we'll see you in another video.